Give it up for Jeff Davis. Oh, man. We got, I need some help from Tanner and Josh here, get set up here. But, hey, while they're coming on stage, and we'll just have that set right off over to this side, I am so thankful that you guys made it. I know some of you braved the weather, but I know we're getting out early. I'm sad there's no small groups. So sad, I know. But I do believe that God has brought each of you here for a reason. I believe God has something special for us. Tonight, we are starting a brand new series, as you can tell, called No Offense. And I think if we're honest, we got to be real. I think so often we can actually be offended quite often. We can, and maybe some of you are like, no, that's not me. I don't get offended. But it could be something small. I think all of us probably in our life have had at least these things called pet peeves. How many of you at least have one pet peeve, something that just irritates you, that when somebody does it, you're like, oh, please stop that. It makes you angry. Okay, let me just give you some examples, because some of these pet peeves, I'm not gonna lie, you guys take really personally, okay? Some of you get personally offended and your day is ruined. And I know there's many of you that when you are in the hallways and you are behind a slow walker and you're trying to get to class and they're just slowly taking their time and you're like, this is ruining my whole day, okay? Some of you are like, I'm the slow walker and I'm fine with it, okay? Others of you, you might have a pet peeve when you go to the movie theater, when somebody's on their phone or they're talking. Or how many of you maybe get a little irritated, maybe you're watching a movie at the movie theater or at home and somebody is constantly asking questions. Oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? And you're sitting there and you're like, oh, why? Okay? Others of you, especially my juniors and seniors and freshmen and sophomores, some sophomores, you'll probably experience this someday, but you get actually so angry when people don't drive the speed limit. Some people in the front were like, ooh, like you get personally offended. I'm not gonna lie. There's times in my car, and maybe you're like me, where I have yelled, and then I'm reflecting in my head, I'm like, why am I doing that? Like, what is wrong with me? But I'm so mad about it. Others of you, maybe, actually, I know there's quite a few of you in this room that are really offended by this. If somebody's like chewing really loud, or with their mouth open, or they're chewing and talking at the same time. I've been at tables where there's people, and I see like the one person that's really affected, and they're like this, and they're looking at the person that's trying to talk and chew, and it's just not working for them, and they're mad, they're angry. Or for me, one of my pet peeves, some of you know this, and some of you may be bothered by this too, is when I'm talking to somebody and they are on their phone. Oh, and it's like a more even serious conversation, and I'm like, I am giving you my undivided attention. I am here with you, and am I not a priority? Like, that's frustrating. Or maybe for some of you, you have a pet peeve of you just hate it when people are late. Or that teammate that shows up 2 minutes before practice starts. And you're like, oh my gosh, why would you scare us? Why would you do that? And some of you are like, I'm that person, okay? Now, some of these are funny things, or they're small things that happen to us, but we actually get a little personally offended. Now, think about it. If we're getting pretty upset about some of these smaller things, I can only imagine what goes through our mind and even our heart when it comes to some of the deeper things of ways people might offend us. Somebody talking behind our back. Somebody that said they were going to do one thing and doesn't do the one thing that you asked them to do or they said they were going to do. Someone that betrays you, breaks your trust, leaves you abandoned. We all have an issue or a circumstance or maybe a person that we're upset about, that we think needs to be addressed, that we're angry, we're offended. And some of you, if you're honest, you get upset about things, and then you go and you tell somebody, and you expect the person that you tell to be upset with you. And if they're not upset, then you get mad at them. Oh, well, you should be mad about this because I'm mad about this, and like, you just don't understand. We gotta stop there for a second, because just because you have a conviction doesn't mean that you can put that conviction on someone else. We're incredibly easily offended. So what should our response be as disciples of Jesus? What would Jesus tell us to do? James chapter 1, verse 19. We're going to put this on the screen. This has been a verse I've come back to and reflected on all week. It's convicted myself. James 1:19, it says this: "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." I'm going to ask you a pretty direct and blunt question. How are we doing with this assignment? How are we doing at being quick to listen? We live in a world where people don't like to listen. I'm not saying that's everybody, because maybe some of you would say, I'm a good listener, Sav. But we don't like to listen. We only want to listen to ourselves and what we have to say, right? We're not quick to listen. How are we doing at being slow to speak? Some of us, we have a lot to say, and we need to make sure that the other person hears what we have to say, because we're right and they're wrong. And the last thing, how are you doing at being slow to anger? I wonder, for some of you, maybe it's like, okay, Sav, I'm doing pretty good. Maybe at being quick to listen, slow to speak, but maybe I'm so quick to become angry. Maybe if that's you, that means you probably are, one, have a lot of thoughts in your mind, and you're keeping it all to yourself, and your anger's all inside of you. It's weighing you down. I think sometimes in life, maybe I'm wrong, I think some people just like to be angry. You've probably met people in your life that you're just like, man, I feel like they like to be angry. They're angry all the time. Or maybe they don't like to be angry, but maybe they're just easily angered. But I actually don't think that that's God's best for us. Like, I don't know about you, but I hate being angry. In fact, I would rather, and you can disagree with me, I think I'd rather have any other emotion, even sadness, than be angry. Because when I'm angry, I feel out of control. Maybe that's you. And let me ask you this question. It might be like a dumb question to ask, but how effective is your anger? Like, how is it working out for you? Is it working? Is it making you more like Jesus? Is it helping you love other people like Jesus would love them? Jesus says, my brothers and sisters, you should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Why? He answers this in verse 20. He says this because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Okay, that's a big word, righteousness. Let me explain. It simply means our anger does not produce living in a right relationship with God and other people. It doesn't. Some of you are like, okay, Sab, but wait, you don't understand. My anger, it's a righteous anger. I'm angry over sin. I'm angry over something that happened that's not okay, that should not be happening. And for a lot of you, maybe that's the case. And there is a thing called righteous anger that breaks the heart of God. And whenever we're angry about someone else's sin, it's always about someone else's sin, right? Think about it. I was pretty convicted of this week. You know, we see horrible things happening in this world. Sex trafficking, we just talked about raising money for She Has a Name. Abuse, betrayal, gossip, bad decisions. We get righteous anger. But when it comes to our own sin, we could care less. We ignore our sin, right? As a Christian, it's easy to call every other horrible thing going on in the world and what everyone else is doing and ignore our sin, our pride, ignore where we fall short. And as a follower of Jesus, we need to make a decision. And we're going to put this on the screen. Do we want to make a point in our anger, or do we want to make a difference? You see, we're not just making a point, but we're making a difference. We're not just trying to win an argument or a conflict. We're trying to win people to Jesus Christ. Like, this is a big deal that we need to take seriously, because it is unavoidable that at some point in your life, you're going to be offended. But living offended is a choice. Jesus never told you that you have to be right, but he did say, be loving. Like, Jesus wants us to lead with love, not anger. Because think about it. Hearts are never changed with judgment and accusations and anger. Hearts are changed with love. And we can have strong opinions about things, but we should never want our opinions about things to overrule our calling to love people like Jesus would. But I think so often that's not the case. So tonight, how do we learn to let go of the anger that we're carrying? How do we learn to overcome being offended? I'm going to give you two things tonight. The first thing is this. Number one, lower your expectations. I need you guys to know a few things, and some of you have probably realized this. Others of you will realize this at one point in your life. These are some unfun statements, in my opinion, that are true, that will probably happen to you. And some of you have experienced these, that people will lie to you. People will betray you. People will not show up for you. People will misunderstand you. People won't say thank you for something that you did, or appreciate you in a way that they probably should. They'll judge you, and they will let you down. But I also want to ask the question, what do we expect though? Because we all at some point have probably let someone down. And instead of saying, I can't believe that they would do that, I can't believe that he would have said that, I think we need to remember, and this is very simple, but it's the truth. Sinners do sinful things. I was listening to a podcast, and the guy literally said, sin is gonna sin. I said, yeah, and we're all sinners. And I think we start with these high expectations that we have for people, and then we always get hurt, and then we're angry. And if you want to know what people are like, especially when the end of the world is coming, Paul writes, and he tells Timothy, he actually says this is what people will be like. He says this, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And I read that this week and I thought, oh man, I'm shocked sometimes when somebody lets me down, but this is the reality. We're all sinners, right? We're living in a broken world. Sinful people do sinful things. And when we think about Jesus, I don't think he was ever shocked by self-centeredness or immoral behavior that people did. Like if you go and through each story, like what do you see? Jesus is at the well. He's meeting this woman who has been married 5 different times, and the man that she's with currently is not even her husband. And he probably has every right to judge her. Walk the other way. He wasn't shocked. He doesn't judge her. What did he do? He offered her living water. The one thing that could satisfy her. I think of Peter. Man, this guy thought he was big stuff. He was bragging to all the people saying, I'll never betray you, Jesus. I will die for you. What does he do? He lied. He betrayed Jesus. He denied Jesus. stabbed Jesus in the back, abandoned Jesus. And what did Jesus not do? You know, if we're in this scenario and a friend lies about us, betrays Jesus, denies Jesus, stabs you in the back, all these things that Jesus experienced, if that happened to you, honestly, I've seen it. What do? We post on our private story and we say, people suck. Everyone leaves. Trust no one. We do that. And don't say, you never done it. I've seen it. But what does Jesus do? He goes straight to Peter and he says, you're going to build my church. You're the rock. I love you. You're going to lead my sheep and take care of my sheep. So how do we learn to let go of the anger inside of us? We have to lower our expectations. And not only do we need to lower our expectations, we need to, number 2, increase our realization. Some of you are like, well, what does that mean? We need to realize a few things. We need to realize that God is perfect and that we're not. And people around us are not. And we need to realize that we are not as good as we think. Like the person that you're angry with, that you have a conflict with, like we need to come to the realization like we're just as bad. We don't want to ever admit that, do we? But in humility, we need to realize I'm not better than anyone else. And this week, Jesus had to remind me of that. He said, Sav, you're not better than anyone else. Sometimes we need a reality check because we're not. We like to put ourselves up on a pedestal and think that we are. We're all sinners. Some of you are like, well, no, Sav, but they lied about me. Okay. You've probably lied too. Well, no, Sav, no, like, you don't understand. Like, he has so much pride. It just drives me crazy. You're telling me you've never had pride? Well, Sav, like, they've never just showed up for me. They haven't been there for me. They haven't supported me like they're supposed to. You're telling me you've never let anyone down? Sav, they've betrayed me. You've probably betrayed people, and if you're sitting in your seats thinking, I've never done that. I've never betrayed anyone. We betray Jesus Christ in our sin every single day. We're no better than anyone else. It reminded me of the story of the woman in Scripture that's caught in adultery. And maybe some of you have heard this story, but let me refresh you. We have these teachers of the law and these Pharisees that drag this woman that's caught in adultery to the temple courts in front of everybody. And they say, Jesus, this woman, she's caught in adultery. The law says to stone her. What should we do? They're obviously trying to trick Jesus. But what does Jesus do? How does he respond? John chapter 8, verses 6 says this. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. These Pharisees, teachers of the law, they've got their rocks. They're like, Jesus, this woman, she's caught in adultery. What do you want us to do? And Jesus essentially says, okay, you're angry. You're upset about what she's done. You want to right the wrongs? Okay. For those of you that have never sinned, you can be the one to throw the first stone. And what happens? One by one, they walk away. Because why? because they realize they can't throw a stone because they're just like the woman. It's like they have a moment of realization like, oh, that's me too. Maybe different sin, maybe different scenario, but that's me. And in humility, we need to take ourself off of the pedestal of trying to be right, trying to get revenge and get even, and realize that we're actually no better. But that's our thought process, right? We think, oh, I've got to be right. I've got to make sure my opinion is heard. That person's got to get what they deserve. But yet, what do we see Jesus do in this story? He leads with love. I don't know if you caught this. I want to put it up on the screen, highlighted here. It says that Jesus, he bent down. Another section says he stooped down. And I think this is a beautiful image for us because it says the woman's standing. Like this should be reversed, right? This woman is in front of everybody, shameful, embarrassed, thinks that she's about to be stoned to death for her sin. And what is Jesus doing? He's stooping down low as she's standing up, saying, I'll take your place. I'll take your consequence, the shame. And he does the same thing for each of us. He takes our shame. He takes our consequence. He takes our wrath. And he says, I've paid it. Like this is the gospel. This is the good news. And when we understand that, it should help us in our anger because we realize we are actually all in need of his grace and forgiveness. And it should motivate us to follow in his example. But yet so many of us, if we're honest, are like the Pharisees, walking around carrying rocks, full of bitterness, full of judgment, full of hatred, thinking, I'm right, I'm justified, I'm angry. And I don't want to minimize whatever hurt some of you in this room might be facing because I realize there may be some deep hurt from things that people have done to you. But whatever we have been hurt or whatever we're angry, there tends to be a thought in our mind that I'm right, they're wrong. I'm right, they're wrong. And if we're not careful, our anger excuses our right to hold the stone. If you're not careful, your anger will excuse your right to hold the stone. And it's not like maybe you're going to throw the stone, but it just makes you feel good having it in your hand just in case you ever need to. Like some of you may be thinking, well, they hurt my friend, they hurt my family, I'm going to hold my stone. They let me down over and over and over again. I'm going to hold my stone. They betrayed me. They spoke poorly about me. They abandoned me. I'm right. They're wrong. I'm going to hold my stone. And there are so many injustices in this world that break the heart of God. And God's heart breaks when people hurt us and sin against us. And he is a fair judge. And I think it's easy for us to want to be righteously angry. But I just want to say this. Really angry people have a hard time making a difference. And I think tonight, even if it's hard, what I believe Jesus would call us to, each of us, myself included, and boy has the Lord convicted my heart this week, is he would call us to drop the stone. Because being offended in this world is unavoidable, but living offended is a choice. So stop holding on to something that is keeping you from walking in freedom. Jesus was quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. He was a man that was perfect, that did no wrong, but he was wrongly accused, right? He was treated poorly. He was judged wrongly. He was betrayed. And yet he refused to be offended. Instead, what did he do? He led with love, not anger, and he put himself up on a cross and took our place. He didn't throw the stone. He moved the stone. And he conquered death so that we could walk in freedom. And yet so many of us don't take advantage of the freedom because we keep picking up all these stones. So tonight as we close, I want to give you an opportunity to respond tonight. In the back, you'll see 2 different tables. And you'll see rocks or stones back there, and you'll see Sharpies. What I encourage you to do is we're going to take some time, and we're just going to reflect, and then we'll end with a worship song. But what I would want you to do in the response is, if you feel led to get up out of your seat, to grab a rock and to grab a Sharpie, to take it back to your seat, and to, in your seat, by yourself, in fact, if you need to spread out, that's fine too, write the thing that you're angry about, maybe the person that you're angry about, whatever it is that you're offended by. Maybe it's something that happened today, you're walking in angry. Maybe it's something that happened this week. Maybe it's something that years ago you are still trying to work through. You'll write that down, and I want you just to sit and pray. And then as you feel led, and if you feel led, to drop your stone at the cross, one of these 2 crosses up here, as a symbol of saying, Lord, I want to try to not live offended. Jesus, would you help me with that? I'm going to be honest though. Some of you may drop the stone tonight and then pick it right up tomorrow. And you might have to continually ask the Lord to help you. Lord, help me drop the stone. Help me. I don't want to walk around in anger all the time. Lord, help me to be somebody that is not easily offended, but somebody that leads with love, somebody that has realistic expectations, but then also understands and realizes that we are not better than anyone else, and realizes God's gift to us. So I'm going to have Josh Pat here for a few minutes, and then the worship team is going to come up, and we'll finish with one last song of worship together. And so on your time, whatever that looks like, whatever posture of worship you need to take, whether you stand and sing, whether you kneel, whether you sit at your seat, let's continue to ask Jesus to help us live a life that would reflect his love. Jesus, it is so crazy to me, Lord, the amount of hatred and betrayal that you experienced, yet you just loved. Like, oh my goodness, I was reading this week and just overwhelmed by how gentle and kind and gracious and loving you are. And Lord, would you help me be like that in the midst of people that frustrate me, in the midst of things that I get angry about. God, I don't want to be controlled by anger. I think so many in this room have been lugging heavy stones for so long, and it's getting tired. And it's certainly not a life of freedom. And God, you have so much more for us. So Jesus, over these next few minutes, would you speak to our heart? Would you help us tonight? Just start with the simple step of just dropping the stone at the cross, knowing that we still may pick it up, but would you help us continue to learn what it looks like to continue to drop the stone and ask for your help, to love people in a hard world, to love sinners just like myself. We need you, Jesus. Thanks for what you've done, God. Would you move during this time? Would you speak, Jesus? And would you have your way?